Here we are with part 3 of the Atlantis B-29 build that I intend to eventually mark as a Tu-4. Please remember any names I mention is just me talking. At the time of making this video, I have no sponsors. In case you're wondering, the Russian Tu-4 markings I hope to use will be me adapting something from a bunch of old Buy It Now decals I got online from that E place. I'm not even sure exactly which ones. I'm not looking for hyper accuracy, just a reasonable representation of what I'm portraying when finished. And, depending on the shape that they are in, I have Microscale's liquid decal film standing by. It's a good product. I've used it to save decals that would have otherwise been unusable. I'm not saying it's always going to work. Some are just too far gone, but if I test a decal sheet, something like the company logo, and it falls apart, I give the liquid film a shot before I give up on them. I had trouble finding some recently. Microscale assures me the product is still being made, and that's a good thing because I have never found anything quite like it anywhere. Running around the ceiling of this workroom is an HO scale layout. One end has a tongue-in-cheek Cold War vibe going on, and I plan to hang this in perspective, flying away from it. By the way, if something seems out of order in these clips like now, it's context, relevance, and maybe it's me getting old enough to forget stuff. Maybe some of you do that too, like, why did I just walk into the kitchen? Anyway, in part 1, I showed how to get a raised, welded seam line using tube glue. But I had to use an old monogram kit to show you because this kit goes together so well, I didn't even think to do it. And there is another thing. With a raised seam line, when you put it together, the rubber bands stand a chance of getting caught in that glue if you're not careful. Not necessarily a problem. It can be sanded away. Panel lines can be relined or rescribed if needed. We are very much good to go here. It's a nice clean job. No fingerprints, thank you. To any beginner, I try to get it snug, not too tight. That would be any time I use rubber bands on a plastic model. Out of sequence and backtracking again. Before assembling the fuselage, the wings had dried were glued together, and it was time for that little bit of filler they needed. Looking back on it now, I suppose a glue-welded seam line might have been just right for this, but then I wouldn't get to show you the Bondo glazing putty. Going way back, I can remember even in the 90s, my go-to favorite putty was Dr. Microtools, but then it disappeared off the shelves. I never cared for Testor's Gray Tube or Squadron much either. I can't tell you the exact time frame, but I muddled about trying to find a putty I liked until one day I saw or heard about or I used Bondo glazing putty. It might have been when I was doing a small repair on my car. Anyway, I somehow found that Bondo's putty looked, felt, and performed exactly the same as Dr. Microtools. By the ounce, it was loads cheaper. Dr. Microtools disappeared so long ago, I can't even find an old picture of it. If I remember correctly, it was a small California-based outfit. To this day, I have to wonder, not to make accusations I know nothing about, but the two, to me, were so similar. I have often wondered if Dr. Microtools' formula was just too close to Bondo's, or if someone was repackaging and rebranding Bondo and putting the doctor's name on it. Again, it's just speculation. Regardless, I'm grateful to have found it, and I appreciate that it is still relatively easy to find. Even Walmart carries it, and it won't set you back a whole lot either. I think I paid $6 or so for a new tube May of 2026, and it's going to last me a very long time. I don't often paint parts on the tree. I know a lot of instructions say to do just that. In this case, I figured a little bit of touch-up would be easier than trying to mount them on something for spraying. And like pretty much everything else, these parts are so clean going in, there's really not a whole lot to do to them. Paint thinner. Almost no kit got built without it for most of my life. Turpentine. Advances in water-based products notwithstanding, it would not be my workroom without it. I'm sure I've covered paint in these videos, but this, to me, is special. Personally, I have never found a better silver than Testor's enamel. I use others for other applications, and you'll see that when we get to the canopy. But for this job, I want what I'm used to. I want it thinned and even and able to flow so well I can freehand this part. Now I know going in, because it's silver, and because it's this particular silver, I do not want to touch it for at least a couple of days to let it dry thoroughly. I also know it will flow so well I won't have to fix much. Some things are worth paying extra for, and to me a tape is one of them. This particular version is made to stretch and go around curves. Irregular tape might work here. I would much rather not cut through tape or masking fluid this time, or firing up the airbrush for the canopy. So I'm going to mask each rib of the frame separately. And this tape is good enough to let me do that. Then I'm going to dry brush them with the water-based Army Painter Silver. Since the canopy is clear, I want something that dries fast and is water-based in case I make a mistake. Now, I'm sure some folk would be thinking this is the long way around. But this has a couple of benefits. I can stop in the middle of the job without any major cleanup. I could let the canopy sit unfinished virtually forever if I wanted to. And time-wise, if it's not quicker, I doubt it takes any longer. But it's absolutely imperative that I don't have any paint bleed around the edges. I first learned how to do that using office drafting tape from an old guy that owned a hobby shop in National City, California, decades ago. Now, that store wasn't much more than a hole in the wall, but he did a steady mail-order business by custom painting model trains for people, and I'm guessing locally too, and he did beautiful work. When it comes to the masking tape for this kind of thing, I do not skimp. The best results I get are Scotch's home and office masking tape. They used to call it drafting tape. I haven't seen it labeled that way in a long time, but it seems to be the same thing. There are times I cut blue painter's tape and others this same way. To get a good clean edge for painting, you take a strip of that tape, lay it out on your cutting board, use an X-Acto and a straight edge to get a good clean line from end to end, and sometimes crossways. The edge that comes with a roll of tape might be good enough for bigger jobs, but not for miniatures. So I will dry brush a little, let it dry a little, and then repeat the process until I'm sure each rib has got enough color on it until finished. It doesn't happen all that often, but once in a while the Bondo glazing putty, it needs a little stirring up. If I need to reach all the way to the end of the tube, I have bamboo kebab skewers. I give it a full day, or two at least. Plane's dried enough to work on. I can remove the rubber bands and the clips. You can see for yourself I wasn't kidding. There really isn't a whole lot of work needed for the fuselage. Of course, I'll sand the seam lines away. I'm using just enough putty to help with that. Might be I don't need that much. And a little more sanding. There's always sanding. Now this here to me is an oddball thing. For the life of me, I can't imagine why Revell would have the tips of the wings separate from the rest of the wing halves. I don't know that I've ever seen that, other than maybe wingtips that had fuel tanks or something. Both wings will need it. A little scraping, a little glue. Certainly not feeling overworked here. Not like this kit has got 103 parts to put together. I believe this model only has 44 parts, and 3 of those are for the stand. I would call this an ideal kit for a beginner, but to me, in a way, there's no such thing as a beginner's kit. Depending on the modeler, you can dress it up however you want. I got this because I wanted something nostalgic. I do try to support Atlantis. I want them to stick around. I had a place where I want to put it, and the scale works for wear. If you haven't noticed, there's no landing gear on this kit. That's not a problem. I need it in flight. And now again, based on my attention span and who knows about yours, it's about time to wrap up this video for part 3 of the B-29 that will eventually be a Tu-4. Please do me a big old favor and like, subscribe, and share. It would just make my day. A huge thank you to those of you who have. Please understand I'm a jack of all kinds of trades and I've got a lot of projects, so if the only name under heaven by which we can be saved permits, part 4 will show up in my videos sometime.